If you remember Grandpa Jones, you probably remember the booming banjo and the "What's for Dinner" on Hee Haw. He was the symbol of fun, the safe, friendly face of country music. But there was a truth about his life that the hat and smile hid. In 1973, it was Grandpa Jones who found the murdered body of his best friend, David Stringbean Aikman. He was the first witness to one of Nashville's most tragic crime scenes. This story is not just about the artist on stage. It's about the witness who had to live with that horrible memory and still found the strength to make the world smile. To understand the man, you have to understand the world that made him. Louis Marshall Jones was born on October 20th, 1913, in the small community of Niagara, deep in the rolling hills of Henderson County, Kentucky. His was a world without television, without superhighways, a world lit by kerosene lamps and powered by muscle and sweat. The youngest of 10 children born to a sharecropper, Louis grew up with the sounds of the old world ringing in his ears. His mother was a folk singer and a ballad collector, his father an old-time fiddle player. Music wasn't a commodity, it was the fabric of life itself. Young Louis soaked it all in. He learned the guitar first, but it was the banjo with its sharp rhythmic twang that truly spoke to his soul. He learned the old-fashioned way, the frailing claw hammer style that had been passed down through generations in the Appalachian Mountains. It was a raw, percussive sound, a world away from the slick, polished banjo picking that would later dominate bluegrass. Louis's banjo sounded like the hills he came from, honest, unvarnished, and full of life. The Great Depression descended upon America when Louis was a teenager, and like so many, his family struggled. But hardship often breeds creativity. Music was an escape, and for a talented few, it was a way out. In the 1930s, a new form of entertainment was sweeping the nation: the radio. Its signal cut through the poverty and isolation of rural America, bringing new sounds and new voices into every living room. For a young man with a guitar, a banjo, and a powerful voice, it was a call to adventure. He started his career in the way so many did back then, bouncing from one small radio station to another. He worked with the singer and radio star Bradley Kincaid, who was known as the Kentucky Mountain Boy. It was Kincaid who gave Louis his first big break, and also his first piece of transformative advice. One early cold morning in Boston, a 22-year-old Louis was on the air, his voice still thick with sleep. After the show, Kincaid told him, "You sound old as a grandpa out there." The name stuck, but it wasn't just a name, it was an identity. In an industry that was already starting to value youthful glamour, Louis Jones made a calculated decision. He would lean into it. He grew the mustache that would become his trademark. He started wearing old-fashioned suspenders and stomping boots. At the tender age of 22, Louis Marshall Jones vanished, and Grandpa Jones was born. It was a brilliant piece of showmanship. The persona gave him a unique hook, making him instantly memorable. It also gave him incredible career longevity. After all, you can't age out of a character if you start out as an old man. The grandpa persona was more than just a costume. It was a character he fully inhabited. And it worked. He found success on major radio shows across the country, from the Boone County Jamboree in Cincinnati to the WWVA Jamboree in Wheeling, West Virginia. He played with the Delmore Brothers and Merle Travis, forming a gospel quartet called the Browns Ferry Four that became wildly popular. His music was a throwback even then. While country music was evolving with the rise of honky-tonk and western swing, Grandpa Jones clung to the old ways. He sang old-time ballads, novelty songs, and heartfelt gospel numbers. His energetic foot-stomping performances were a joy to behold. He'd frail his banjo, kick his leg up high, and let out a booming laugh. He was a one-man folk festival, a preservationist disguised as a comedian. Grandpa Jones's life took a significant turn in 1946 when he met Ramona Riggins, a young artist with a talent and depth far beyond her years. Ramona, who was a skilled violinist and mandolin player, was not only a talented musician but also a strong personality, possessing the same maturity and passion for music as Grandpa Jones. Although 15 years younger than him, Ramona quickly became an indispensable part of his life and career, creating a strong relationship that combined both love and musical harmony. The meeting between Grandpa Jones and Ramona was not only a love story, but also the beginning of an inspiring musical collaboration. On stage, Ramona not only played the role of an accompanist, but also an artist who added unique nuances to their performances. Her violin, sometimes melodious as if telling ancient stories, sometimes lively, combined with Grandpa Jones's banjo rhythm, created a distinctive sound, both nostalgic and full of life. Ramona's mandolin playing ability further enriched the repertoire, bringing delicate melodies, helping them stand out on radio shows and music festivals. The combination of the two was not only a blend of instruments, but also the sublimation of two souls who loved the traditional values of folk music. Outside the spotlight, Ramona was a solid pillar in Grandpa Jones's personal life. In the volatile entertainment world, where fame can easily be swept away by pressure and temptation, Ramona was the one who kept their family stable. She was not only a devoted wife, but also a shrewd manager, helping Grandpa Jones navigate his career through its ups and downs. From organizing the tour schedule, negotiating with producers, to taking care of family life during long tours, Ramona has always shown intelligence and determination. It is her unwavering support that has allowed Grandpa Jones to focus on creating and performing while remaining committed to the nostalgic style of music he loves. The relationship between Grandpa Jones and Ramona is also a testament to the power of companionship and mutual respect. On stage, they are a perfect match, with Grandpa Jones bringing his humorous, lively energy and Ramona adding his sophistication and depth. Their performances together, from small country stages to large shows like the Grand Ole Opry, are always full of emotion and sincerity, making the audience not only fall in love with the music, but also feel the special bond between the two. The year 1947 marked an unforgettable milestone in Grandpa Jones's career when he received the call he had always dreamed of, an invitation to join the cast of the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Tennessee. At the time, the Opry was more than just a radio show. It was the living symbol of country music, the flame that lit and defined an entire genre. Broadcast live from the Ryman Auditorium, revered as the mother church of country music, the Opry was the ultimate destination for any country artist who dreamed of being recognized and asserting their position in the industry. Becoming a member of the Grand Ole Opry was more than just a performance opportunity. It was a rare honor, the equivalent of knighthood in the music kingdom. For Grandpa Jones, the invitation was a recognition of his unique talent, a nostalgic artist who stuck to classic ballads, gospel, and vibrant banjo rhythms, while the rest of the country music world was moving toward more modern honky-tonk and western swing. Joining the Opry meant sharing the stage with legends who had shaped and were still shaping the legacy of country music. It was a testament to how his energetic performance, infectious laughter, and commitment to preserving folk music touched the hearts of audiences across America. The Ryman Auditorium, with its sacred atmosphere and rich musical history, became a second home for Grandpa Jones. Every time he stepped on stage, he brought not only his banjo and energetic footwork, but also his passionate love of old-fashioned tunes. His performances at the Opry were more than just musical spectacles. They were immersive experiences, where audiences witnessed an artist fully embodying the character of Grandpa, a musical storyteller, a guardian of folk heritage disguised as a comedian. His jangling banjo, impromptu high kicks, and infectious smile turned each performance into a mini festival, reliving the spirit of the early days of country music. Joining the Opry also gave Grandpa Jones a sense of belonging to a special community, a spiritual family of artists who shared a love of country music and culture. Here, he not only performed but also connected, learned, and collaborated with big names, from old friends like the Delmore brothers to new artists he met on the Ryman stage. His presence at the Opry cemented his place as a pioneer in preserving folk music, while opening the door for him to reach a wider audience, from those listening on the airwaves to those sitting in packed houses. With every note played at the Opry, Grandpa Jones not only performed, but told the story of America's musical roots, keeping them alive in the hearts of listeners. It was here, in the wings and dressing rooms of the Ryman, that Grandpa Jones found his tribe. He forged lifelong friendships with legends like Roya Cuff, Minnie Pearl, and a lanky, unassuming banjo player from Kentucky named David Ackerman. David Ackerman had a stage name too. He was Stringbean. The name came from his tall, thin frame. Like Grandpa, Stringbean was a comedian and an immensely talented old-time banjo player. His act was even more eccentric than Grandpa's. He wore a ridiculously long shirt tucked into a tiny pair of pants, creating a bizarre, scarecrow-like silhouette. His comedy was deadpan, his timing impeccable. On stage, Grandpa was loud and boisterous. Stringbean was quiet and sly. But off stage, they were two sides of the same coin. They had grown up just 50 miles from each other in Kentucky, though they didn't meet until they were both established performers. They shared a deep love for the old mountain music, a suspicion of modern life, and a humble, down-to-earth approach to their fame. While other stars were buying Cadillacs and moving into mansions in Nashville's wealthy suburbs, Grandpa and Ramona bought a modest farm outside the city. Stringbean and his wife Estelle did the same, buying a small rustic cabin on a plot of land in Goodlettsville, just a short drive away. They weren't just colleagues, they were neighbors and best friends. They hunted and fished together. Their wives were close. The Joneses would often join the Ackermans for a simple supper of pinto beans and cornbread. Stringbean, a quiet and deeply private man, trusted Grandpa completely. He was one of the few people who saw the man behind the scarecrow costume. He knew that David Ackerman was a man who had lived through the Depression and never lost his fear of banks and institutions. It was a well-known, if not widely broadcast, fact among their inner circle that Stringbean didn't trust banks. He was said to carry large wads of cash on him and was rumored to keep his life savings hidden somewhere in his little country cabin. It was a quirk, a relic of an older time. No one thought it could be dangerous. In the late 1960s, television was rapidly becoming a mainstream medium, shaping American popular culture with ever-increasing influence. In that context, in 1969, a bold idea was born from television producers, a country-influenced comedy variety show that combined authentic music, down-home humor, and the charm of live performances. The show was called Hee Haw, a name that evoked the rustic, playful, and spirit of rural America. With its fast pace, corny jokes, beautiful girls, and casual but attractive costumes, and above all, authentic country tunes, Hee Haw quickly captured the hearts of audiences, becoming an unexpected cultural phenomenon. Though criticized by critics as vulgar, unsophisticated, and downright pop entertainment, Hee Haw was an instant hit with the public. Audiences across America were captivated by the sincerity and pure joy of the show. They loved skits like PFFT, You Were Gone, where the characters delivered witty one-liners that made viewers laugh out loud. The song Gloom, Despair, and Agony on Me, with its sarcastic melody and self-deprecating lyrics, became an icon of the show, echoing in the minds of viewers as a reminder of the humor in life's hardships. The constant jokes from the cornfield, a corner of the show where the cast told short, silly, yet charming jokes, made the audience feel as if they were sitting at a family gathering in the countryside. Hee Haw was more than just a show. It brought the spirit of the Grand Ole Opry, a fusion of country music, vaudeville comedy, and folklore, from the big stage into the living rooms of millions of Americans. The show brought to life the atmosphere of country music festivals, where music, laughter, and community were at the heart of everything. The musical performances on Hee Haw not only featured top country stars like Johnny Cash, Loretta Lynn, and Tammy Wynette, but also featured artists like Grandpa Jones, who brought a nostalgic style to the show with his pulsing banjo and energetic footwork. The presence of such artists helped Hee Haw maintain its commitment to authentic country music while reviving traditional values in an era of rapidly changing popular culture. The appeal of Hee Haw lies in its ability to balance simple entertainment with a celebration of rural culture. Though it was largely overlooked by critics, the show tapped into a deep need in audiences, a connection to simple, heartfelt values and pure joy. The humorous, sometimes silly skits had a special charm, reminiscent of the old-time minstrel shows. The musical numbers, folk dances, and rural jokes created a space where audiences could temporarily forget the worries of modern life and immerse themselves in simplicity and warmth. Hee Haw was more than just a television show. It was a reminder of America's cultural roots, a folk festival brought to life on the small screen, leaving a deep impression on audiences and becoming an indispensable part of the country music and entertainment heritage. For Grandpa Jones and Stringbean, it meant a new level of fame. They became household names. In a generation where many young viewers may not have experienced country radio, Grandpa Jones found a way to infuse his down-to-earth image into their hearts through the television show Hee Haw, with his signature line, "What's for supper?" Grandpa Jones became one of the show's most iconic characters, the nation's favorite grandfather. The question, often uttered with a mischievous grin and a deep voice, was always accompanied by humorous stories about a rustic country meal. The name of his beloved wife, Ramona, was often cleverly inserted into the jokes, creating a goofy charm that audiences couldn't help but love. These moments not only brought laughter, but also cemented Grandpa Jones as a symbol of simplicity, intimacy, and warmth, as if he were the grandfather of every American family. The line, "What's for supper?" It's more than a joke. It's a window into Grandpa Jones's world, a world of traditional values, where family meals and stories shared around the table are central to life. Audiences, urban and rural alike, are drawn to his sincerity in telling stories about rustic dishes, often accompanied by a wink or a playful kick, reminiscent of the simpler days of America. Ramona's presence in the jokes is not only a humorous detail, but also a subtle tribute to his partner, who has accompanied him through everything from the Grand Ole Opry stage to the television spotlight. The combination of Grandpa Jones's playful personality and his affection for Ramona creates a grandfather who is not only lovable but also respectful, making audiences feel like they are talking to a family member. Grandpa Jones's life at this time seems to embody the American dream. Not only was he a star on the Grand Ole Opry, where he continued to deliver his vibrant banjo melodies and nostalgic ballads, but he was also a familiar face on national television on Hee Haw, where he won over audiences with his humor and talent. In addition to his brilliant career, he also had a happy family life with Ramona and their children. Along the way, Grandpa Jones had an indispensable close friend, Stringbean, another country artist who was also a frequent guest on Hee Haw. The two friends, with their similar down-to-earth style and love of folk music, often appeared together on the show, providing humorous moments and emotional performances. Stringbean, with his banjo and down-to-earth personality, was the perfect partner for Grandpa Jones. Together they created a warm atmosphere, an antidote to the tumultuous times of the late 60s and early 70s, when American society was facing political and cultural upheaval. Their performances, whether a silly joke or a simple country song, evoked a gentler, more innocent America, a time when community, family, and simplicity were paramount. But that innocence was about to be brutally extinguished. The world of the Grand Ole Opry in those days was built on trust. It was a community where a handshake was a binding contract, and a man's word was his bond. The stars were accessible. They didn't live behind high walls with teams of security. It was famously said that Minnie Pearl's phone number was listed in the Nashville directory. Fans knew where the stars lived, and it wasn't uncommon for them to drop by unannounced, hoping for an autograph. It was a folksy, small-town atmosphere, even as Nashville's music industry was booming into a multi-million-dollar business. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone looked out for each other. No one locked their doors. There was no reason to. Saturday, November 10th, 1973, was a typical day for the Opry stars. They performed 2 shows in the evening at the Ryman. Grandpa Jones was there. So was Stringbean. He did his usual comedy routine, got his usual laughs. He and Grandpa chatted backstage, just like they had 1,000 times before. After the second show, around 10 or 11 p.m., Stringbean and his wife Estelle left the Ryman for the 30-minute drive back to their little cabin in the woods. Stringbean had his performance fee from the night in his pocket, a few $100s in cash. The next morning, Sunday, Grandpa Jones and his wife Ramona were at home when the phone rang. It was their mutual friend and fellow musician, Grant Turner. He was worried. Stringbean had been scheduled to go on a hunting trip that morning, but he hadn't shown up. It wasn't like him. He was a man of his word, punctual to a fault. They tried calling his cabin, but there was no answer. Grandpa wasn't immediately alarmed. Perhaps they just decided to sleep in. Still, a small knot of unease began to form. He and Ramona decided to take a drive out to the cabin to check on their friends. It was a chilly, overcast November day. The drive down the long gravel road to the Akeeman property was quiet. When they pulled up to the small rustic cabin, the first thing they noticed was a broken pane of glass in the front door. The knot of unease tightened. This was wrong. Stringbean was a meticulous man who took care of his property. In his autobiography, Grandpa remembered the moment vividly. He called out his friend's name. Dave? Estelle? Silence. He pushed the front door open and stepped inside. The cabin was small, just a few rooms. It was in a state of disarray. Drawers pulled out, furniture overturned. It had been ransacked. Still calling their names, Grandpa walked through the small home. There was no sign of them. Ramona waited outside, her own sense of dread growing with every passing second. Grandpa came back out the front door, deeply worried now. He decided to walk around the property, hoping to find some clue. As he rounded the corner of the cabin, he saw them. First, he saw Estelle, lying in the damp grass a short distance from the house. Then, a few yards away, he saw his best friend, David Stringbean Aikman. Both had been shot. The world stopped. The cheerful, booming voice of Grandpa Jones was choked with a sound of pure, horror. He stumbled back toward his car, his mind reeling, trying to process the impossible sight. He told Ramona what he had found, and they sped away from the horrible scene, racing to a neighbor's house to call the police. The idyllic world of the Grand Ole Opry had just been invaded by a savagery it had never known. The laughter had stopped. The investigation revealed a story of shocking greed and senseless violence. The killers were two cousins, John A. Brown and Marvin Douglas Brown. They had heard the persistent rumors that the old-timey banjo player from Hee Haw didn't trust banks and kept a fortune hidden in his home. On that Saturday night, they had waited for Stringbean and Estelle to return from the Opry. They ambushed Stringbean in the front yard as he was getting out of his car. They demanded his money. Stringbean, true to form, had his night's pay in his overalls. He handed it over, but the killers didn't believe that was all he had. They dragged him into the cabin and tore the place apart, searching for the mythical hidden treasure. When they couldn't find it, they shot him. When Estelle ran screaming from the cabin, they shot her too, chasing her down and killing her in the yard. The killers fled with just a few $100s and some firearms. The legendary treasure they were looking for was never found. Tragically, it was later revealed that Stringbean did have a significant amount of cash on him, sewn into a special pocket in his overalls. In their haste and greed, the killers had missed it entirely. They had murdered two beloved, innocent people for nothing. The Nashville community was thrown into a state of shock and grief. This wasn't supposed to happen here. This wasn't supposed to happen to them. They were a family. Stringbean was one of their own, a gentle soul whose only crime was living a simple, trusting life. The funeral was a somber affair, attended by the biggest names in country music, their faces etched with disbelief and sorrow. For Grandpa Jones, the grief was personal and profound. He hadn't just lost a colleague, he had lost his closest friend, and he was the one who had to find him. The image of that horrific scene was burned into his memory. A few weeks later, the Brown cousins were apprehended. The trial that followed was a media sensation, and one of the key witnesses for the prosecution was Louis Grandpa Jones. He had to take the stand and recount in painstaking detail the events of that Sunday morning. He had to describe finding the bodies of his friends. He spoke in a low, steady voice, but the pain was evident to everyone in the courtroom. His testimony was crucial, and it helped send both killers to prison for the rest of their lives. But the verdict couldn't undo the damage. A deep and lasting chill had fallen over the Nashville music scene. The era of unlocked doors and easy trust was over. Stars started installing security systems. The Opry, which was preparing to move from the old Ryman to a modern new complex at Opryland, suddenly seemed to be leaving more than just a building behind. It was leaving behind an age of innocence. How does a man go on after something like that? How does a man whose entire career is built on projecting simple, old-fashioned joy continue to do so while carrying such a heavy burden of grief and trauma? For Grandpa Jones, the answer was simple. The show must go on. He returned to the Grand Ole Opry. He returned to Hee Haw. He put on the bucket hat and the boots, picked up his banjo, and he performed. He stomped his feet. He sang the old songs. He told the corny jokes. To the millions of viewers at home, he was the same lovable grandpa. But to those who knew him well, there was a change. A light in his eyes had dimmed. The boisterous, booming laugh didn't come quite as easily backstage. He rarely, if ever, spoke of the murders publicly. It was a private pain, a sacred wound he shared only with Ramona and his closest confidants. Performing wasn't a denial of his grief. It was his way of surviving it. The music, the old songs he and Stringbean had both loved so much, became a form of therapy, a way to honor his friend's memory. He was keeping the tradition alive for both of them. He poured his energy into his work and his family. He and Ramona continued to tour, becoming ambassadors for old-time music. In 1978, his status as a living legend was cemented when he was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. The plaque celebrated his decades-long career as a singer, comedian, and virtuoso of the old-time banjo. It was a fitting tribute, but it only told half the story. One of the most poignant and rarely mentioned facts about Grandpa Jones's later life is what he did with Stringbean's bird dogs. Stringbean had loved to hunt, and his dogs were his pride and joy. After the murders, there was no one to care for them, so Grandpa took them in. For the rest of their lives, those dogs were a living, breathing connection to his fallen friend, a daily reminder of both the deep friendship they shared and the sudden, violent way it had ended. It was a quiet, personal act of remembrance. Far from the glare of the stage lights, he carried that memory with him for another 25 years. He saw hee-haw come to an end. He saw country music change in ways that were almost unrecognizable from the sounds of his youth. And he saw a new generation of fans discover his music. He became an elder statesman, a beloved patriarch of the country music world. On a cold Saturday night in January 1998, Louis Grandpa Jones, now 84, was where he belonged most in the world, the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. Despite his advanced age, he performed with incredible energy, still stomping his feet to the beat, still flashing the familiar smile that had warmed millions of hearts. The audience that night witnessed a classic performance, not knowing that it would be their last. Shortly after he entered the wings with applause still ringing, tragedy struck. He collapsed. The massive stroke had struck him suddenly and brutally. Chaos and panic reigned backstage at the Opry as fellow musicians and staff rushed to help. The man who had been an unshakable pillar of the place for more than half a century lay motionless. He was rushed to the hospital and slipped into a coma. For the next several weeks, the country music community held its breath, praying for a miracle. But Grandpa Jones never woke up. He died on February 19th, 1998. The news of his passing sent shockwaves across America. For his fans, it was more than just the death of an artist. With the grandpa character he had so perfectly crafted, the loss felt deeply personal, as if they had lost a family member. Country radio stations played his songs nonstop. Newspapers ran solemn eulogies, calling him a national treasure and one of the last giants of the Golden Age. At the Grand Ole Opry, the pain was even deeper. His passing marked the end of an era. He was one of the last links to the generation that built Nashville, a friend to legends like Roy Acuff and Minnie Pearl. Artists shared tearful memories on the airwaves, talking about his kindness, his sense of humor, and his tireless dedication to old-time music. It was almost poetic, but also heartbreaking, that his final moments of sobriety were spent in the place that had defined his life. He died in his spiritual home, surrounded by his Opry family. The last time he heard applause was at the place he had dedicated his life to bringing joy. For Grandpa Jones, the last performance really did last until the last breath. The legacy Grandpa Jones left behind is immense. He was a master musician who championed a style of banjo-playing that might have otherwise faded into obscurity. He was a television pioneer who brought country humor into the American mainstream. He was, as his autobiography was titled, Everybody's Grandpa. His life reminds us that the brightest smiles can hide the deepest sorrows. Grandpa Jones spent half his career building a character of pure, simple joy, and the other half performing that character while carrying an unimaginable darkness. He never let the tragedy define him in public, but it undoubtedly shaped the rest of his days. He was a symbol of an innocent, bygone era, but he was also the man who witnessed the moment that innocence was lost. And in the end, perhaps his greatest performance was the quiet dignity with which he carried it all. He kept the music playing, not to forget the past, but to honor it, ensuring that the joyful sounds of the old-time banjo would echo long after the memory of that dark, silent morning began to fade.